Hello everybody, Disciple here with Hearthstone Curios. Now, legendaries in Hearthstone are almost always iconic characters with very cool abilities or crazy cards that can really change the game completely. Still though, much like other cards, legendaries can be really good, really bad, and somewhere in between. Today we thought we'd cast off the nostalgia of some old departed legendaries and talk about some of the best legendaries that are in Standard today and what it is that makes those cards so strong. Now let's get right into it, and keep in mind that this could also be viewed as a list of some legendaries you might want to craft next if you haven't already done so. First up, it's Blood Mage Thalnos. Thalnos has been seeing a ton of play lately in things like Control Mage, Freeze Mage, and Miracle Rogue, and it's been seen in a lot of decks in the past as well. It's just a super efficient utility card, giving you both spell damage and card draw all in one. And although it's not one of the flashier legendaries, there are some decks that Thalnos will be the perfect card for. Control Mage is possibly the best deck in the game right now, and while it's worth noting that Thalnos isn't always a win condition for Control Mage, it certainly is a staple for it. And although Control Mage lists are super tight already, Thalnos is one of the last cards that would get cut and is definitely one of the most useful legendaries in Standard right now, giving you a little bit of extra reach to remove that minion with 7 health or 4 health, while also drawing cards is crazy, or putting it into your finisher with your Frostbolt and your Fireball as well can win you the game against classes that might be able to heal after your Alexstrasza. Next up, it's Aya Blackpaw, which sees a good amount of play in things like Token Shaman or Jade Druid. Aya's ability to get value in a mid-range deck or create giant monstrosities in a Jade-focused deck makes it a really versatile card that almost always provides good value and bodies for things like Bloodlust, but can also be 3 threats in 1 if you're making big enough Jade Golems. Overall, Aya just gets a ton of value and does a really solid job ensuring against board wipes and rebuilding your board from scratch, and that's something pretty much every deck wants. It's one of the best legendaries in Standard for sure, and even if you haven't been boosting up your Jade cards, it's still a strong card on its own. Moving on, we have Patches the Pirate. Patches is just a completely ridiculous card, and one that has single-handedly kept Pirate Warrior a tier 1 deck since its release, even after the nerf of one of its strongest cards. Getting a 1/1 charge for free might not seem like a big deal, but it's actually insane. Not only do you get a 1/1 with charge that enables your deck synergies since it is a pirate, it also thins the card out of your deck so that you're not going to draw a 1/1 with charge that costs mana, and instead you'll draw your good cards that can do even more damage to your opponent's face. Over one game, this is a really nice little bonus, but over hundreds of games, it's actually going to give you a few extra win percentage points that you really look for when you're trying to play competitively. Not to mention how insane it is in Wild with things like Ship's Cannon and One-Eyed Cheat. Patches is just a super efficient card, and it's one of the best legendaries in the game, hands down. Up next, it's Sunkeeper Tarim. Both mid-range and aggro paladin are top tier decks, and there's a reason they both almost always play Tarim. Symmetrical effects are often broken because you can time them to your advantage, and Tarim's no exception. If your opponent has a huge board full of big minions and you get to make them all small, and if you have a board full of Silverhand recruits or other tokens and you can buff them up and swing in for lethal, or just trade them with your opponent's giant minions that are all now 3/3s. Tarim's also amazingly cheap for the stats and how powerful the effect is, and the fact that you can pair him with a 4-drop in the late game just makes him completely insane. One of the most efficient and highest impact legendaries there is in the game, by far. Moving on, we have another Paladin card, Tirion Forging, and one that's been one of the best legendaries since the start of the game. It's always been amazing, and although 8 mana is pretty expensive for the current meta, it's the best finisher that mid-range or control Paladin could ask for. It's a super tough wall to get through since not many decks are running Silent, so unless the enemy Shaman has a Hex or the enemy Mage has a Polymorph, it's going to get value from the Taunt, the Divine Shield, and of course, the insane Death Rattle. All in all, Tirion is just a really good late game card that people aren't playing enough answers to, and it's definitely one of the strongest cards in Standard at the moment. Next up, it's not everyone's favorite card, but one that's really made a place for itself over time, Leroy Jenkins. Leroy is mainly played in Pirate Warrior and a few variations of Aggro Druid or Aggro Hunter, but that's enough for it to be a super strong force in Standard. 6 damage for only 5 mana is enough to close out tons of games, especially when you're an incredibly aggressive deck, and Leroy gives a lot of those decks the reach they need to win. Even just the threat of Leroy is enough to make people play differently, and although it's not quite as insane as it used to be, it still definitely deserves a spot on the standard legendaries power ranking. Now, some people might ask, why is Leroy Jenkins on here if it's a worse finisher than something like Fireball? And the reason is because the decks that it's played in, like Druid and Warrior, tend to lack finishers like this that are as strong, and so the class it's played in definitely has a huge influence on it. And being able to combo this with another cheap minion with charge and maybe a weapon means that you can finish off a lot more games than you could have otherwise. Anyway, continuing on, it's Finja the Flying Star. Now, Finjas fit into a ton of lists lately, from aggro decks like Druid or Murloc Paladin to mid-range variants that also play Murlocs as well, simply because the value from this card is actually crazy. Pulling cards from your deck and putting them into play is insane value, like we've seen for something like Patches the Pirate, and even if you get the worst Murlocs in your deck onto the board, it's still going to be amazing value for you. But if you pull yourself something like Ward Leader or Bluegill Warrior, then you can completely swing the board or even win the game with lethal. Water Rogue was the best deck for a while, all thanks to Finja, and while it's still a really solid card in the current meta, the sky is the limit for it in the future, and it actually kind of limits the Murlocs that Blizzard can include in future expansions. Anyway, our next legendary on the list is the Curator. The Curator sees plays in things like Control and Midrange Paladin, as well as Taunt Warrior, and it's just all around an incredibly solid card. For 7 mana and maybe a few slight deck building alterations, you get a 7 mana 4/6 that draws you 3 cards, and that's pretty damn good. There's not too much more to say about the Curator beyond that, but as long as good dragons, murlocs, and beasts exist, and the meta isn't too fast for 7 drops, the Curator will continue to get tons of value its entire time in Standard. Another thing I can say about the Curator is that Finja the Flying Star's presence in the meta actually makes it stronger, since even if your deck doesn't have Finja or even any other murloc, you definitely want to put in Stampeding Kodo. Not only is it a beast that you can pull with Curator and get yourself some extra value, but it also deals with Finja perfectly, and as long as any other decks are running Finja, then Stampeding Kodo can completely swing the board for you and keep Finja from getting any value itself. Up next, another card that is pretty commonly seen in Warrior, Fireplume's Heart. Now, Fireplume's Heart has an entire deck built just around it, which should tell you something even if that deck has dropped off a little bit lately. This card is just insanely good on principle, since it gives you a super high payoff for surviving long and fulfilling the condition, just like all quests do, but the condition of 7 taunts happens to also make you survive longer, making Fireplume's Heart better than almost every other quest. When you throw in the fact that it's pretty much impossible to interact with Sulfuras as a win condition, and the fact that this deck has a ton of potential depending on how the meta evolves, it's easy to see why Fireplume's Heart is one of the best legendaries currently in the game. The fact that it gives you a win condition by itself while allowing you to survive early on means that the deck really plays itself, and it's a very simple playstyle that it's pretty easy to get the hang of and that you can do really well with once you've learned the hang of it. Last but not least, it's the Caverns below. The reason Fireplume's Heart is better than almost every quest is thanks to the Caverns below. The deck has dropped off a tiny bit as well due to the prevalence of super fast aggro decks and other things that can counter it pretty well, but it still remains a really strong deck with tons of potential and completely nutty draws that can kill your opponent so fast. Caverns will definitely be a card to watch its entire time in Standard because it's just so strong and it can take your opponent by such surprise if you really get off an insane draw. Making all of your minions 5/5s pretty easily is busted by itself, but when you combine it with 1 mana charge minions and bounce spells and minions that double as quest setup and lethal setup, you get a pretty insane card in itself. Caverns definitely deserves a spot as one of the strongest legendaries in Standard, and although there are ways to counter it, really the only reason that those decks are in Standard is because Caverns was out of control for quite some time. Now, those are what we think these 10 strongest legendaries are in Standard right now, but I'm curious if you guys disagree with our list and you think there are any other legendaries in the game that beat those out. Of course, we're going to differ in some places, but I think we can all agree that the 10 that we have on this list are pretty powerful in their own right, and they've all had places in some very strong meta decks. Now, the meta might change in a few weeks or a few months, and the next expansion will definitely shake things up, but this was how we saw this snapshot of the meta currently as it is. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you subscribe so you can catch our next video as well, and I'll see you next time. Peace.